I'll start up now. Here we go. Start today with some announcements, okay? You guys are all unmuted, so feel free to chime in whenever you can. All right. Hey, Hannah. All right, my pleasure. Welcome. Here's some announcements for today. You probably noticed on Canvas a new module has gone live this morning, and that's our second remote student learning module. That will cover the stuff that we're starting today and then going to go over this week, which is Chapter 10, the increase in papal power, how the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church are going to start really flexing their muscles against the state governments of England, France, and Germany. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's what we're getting into at Chapter 10, and that's what the new module will have a few things on that. The invite that I'll send out in a little bit later today for Thursday Zoom session, that will contain instructions and helpful things for you to make your way through Chapter 10 for Thursday. It'll include some sources. You'll notice there's already a source listed within Canvas on that. So just be ready for instructions on that, what we want to do with Chapter 10 before we get in here on Thursday. Is that cool? Okay. All right. Good. After today's class, and then later today, at the latest tomorrow morning, quiz number 3 will go live and be published for you guys to work on. Okay, same amount of thing you have. I'll give you, lots of time to work on it. Week, longer if necessary. I know that this is crazy times and people are working remotely, and some of you guys are doing jobs outside of stuff. So I really want to kind of not be too much of a hard guy with these due dates, but at the same time, we got to realize that we have to complete, work in a timely fashion to make sure that you're doing the best that you can in the class. But I'm not going to be, like I said, I'm not going to be a hard guy with the due dates. I'd like you to try to finish the quiz within the next week. Is that cool? Okay. If not, send me a message and let me know. And I'll be perfectly chill with that. I understand there's a lot of stuff going on. Okay. So a few more announcements. That quiz number 3, by the way, that'll cover everything that's in remote learning module number 1. So it'll be, all the Viking stuff, all the feudalism stuff, all the stuff on William of Normandy, Battle of Hastings, all that. Okay, so that'll be all that's within chapters 7 and 8. That's quiz number 3. Coolio with that? Okay, so everybody's good to go on what's contained in there. Continue to work on your annotation and your annotated bibliographies. Okay, one of the reasons that I had you do one for today is because a week from today, I would like us to have essentially our draft, our close to finished, but still rough draft version of the other 5 sources that you would hopefully use. Okay. Now, hopefully by the end, your annotated bibliography will be more than just 5 sources. Okay. Remember, the bare minimum is 5. But if you want to use more, it would be highly recommended to bounce more sources off one another. Okay. Does each annotation have to be the same length? No, it doesn't. Sometimes you'll be able to, some sources you'll be able to summarize more easily than others. Okay. So don't worry if one of your annotations is a little bit shorter than the other one. Okay. Don't try to force out stuff that isn't there. Just sort of say what you got from it. Brief summary, and let me know if it was helpful or not. Okay. So don't worry about trying to fit in, BS sentences here or there just to make it look as full as maybe the other ones that were really helpful. Okay. Try your hardest to get that draft into Canvas by next Tuesday, the 13th. Okay. Let's try our hardest to get it in by then. and that way we can get full credit, and we can assess that and get it ready to go. Okay, so that'll be April 13th. Try also, guys, a few of you are submitting things because you probably got Macs. You're submitting them in pages to me. I can read those on my phone, and it's just that it would be nice if you were able to. If you're not able to, it's okay. But there's conversion stuff out there that can convert pages into docx. The only way I'm able to read this on this computer, because it's from Thomas More, is we're exclusively a Microsoft company. So the only way I'm able to read it is in docx. So if you get a chance, most of you are submitting in docx. A couple of people are throwing me stuff in pages. I'm able to read it on my phone, but try to get it in docx form if that's cool. Okay. So that's it for the announcements for the day. If you guys got anything, comments, questions for me, ask them now. Raise your hands. I'll call on you, or just speak up. Like I said, you're all unmuted. Anybody got anything? If not, no, I mean, I'm in the meantime, while you're thinking, I'll do some banjo finger exercises. No? Okay, great.
So all the sources that we need for the quiz are all in Learning Module 1. We don't have to go outside of it for anything needed for the quiz, like the sources or the, okay.
Nope. Remember, we didn't use, we did use the omnibus in chapter 7 to read Ibn Fadlan and his recounting of what went on during that terrible ceremony with the Vikings. We did use the source book on that, but we didn't use the omnibus for chapter 9, nor we won't use it very much in chapter 10. There is one source I'd like you to look at within chapter 10, and like I said, I'll send that out this week. But that's, Ethan, that's outside the bounds of quiz 3. Okay. Awesome. Good question. Anything else that you guys can think of question-wise?
Not currently.
Okay. Well, then let's start where we wanted to start, which is I wanted to talk about our annotations. So I don't know, Ethan, you want to start us off? Tell us about your annotation, what the source was, and did you find it helpful or not?
Sure. Well, I had two. I had one right off the top of my head. I'll start off with this one. It was from this guy who is not a historian, but he uses a historian-like approach to things. He is a supply chain specialist, and he was talking about the Vikings trading culture, and I thought that tied in pretty nicely with my paper visits on the Vikings.
Yeah.
He just kind of takes a different approach to the topic, and I thought that was interesting and helpful. I need to go. It's a long source, so I need to go back into it and work through it some more. But I mean, I thought it was very helpful, and I pulled a lot of the stuff to save for later.
That's awesome. You said he's a supply chain specialist, so he's kind of an expert on trade, and he looked at. That's really cool. So I mean, so it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't have to be necessarily from a classically trained historian. We can find all kinds of sources on those types of things. Remember, guys, you can use, if you like, you can use videos. You can use helpful, sources if it's a documentary where they interview and talk to a few historians. Don't think that those are out of bounds or off limits for this paper. It doesn't have to be specifically just bound text sources, but also at the same time, strive for balance in your sources. Don't use all videos. Don't use all just texts. All right, and those types of things. Okay, so but I have no problem at all. I got no issue at all using a helpful website or as long as it's reputable. You know what I mean? As long as it's long as, if you're doing the Vikings, it's not coming from, ivartheboneless.com or something like that. So it's, it's coming from a reputable site. And I'm perfectly cool with that. Anybody else want to volunteer? One of their sources, what they looked at. That was great, Ethan. Thank you.
Sure.
Holly, is that you?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, what you want to talk about?
So the one I found was brief. It was extremely brief. It was only a few paragraphs, but in the paragraphs it had like very well put together ideas and details, and the author did very well at supporting his evidence.
What is your paper on?
So it's on the Vikings, and I broke my paper down into 2 different parts. So like I'm focusing on the first part was like, where did like the Vikings come from, like their original roots, so to say. So for the first part is what I wanted to use for my practice annotated bibliography. And with the author I found, it was his title was "What Countries Were the Vikings From?" And basically the support and like reasoning I used was basically, with the use of this article will allow for a greater understanding of the Vikings' roots. This source also goes into further detail of how their heritage spread into modern day culture.
Like it.
So then I went on to say, like, based off the original roots, we can trace it into some heritages today, but it's like almost minute.
Sure.
And then, so basically I use it in support for the first section. This will add to the basis of where they began. And then for the second half, it gives the ability to begin analysis of where small parts of the culture are still today, which will be tackled in like the second part of the paper.
So you found it very helpful.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
It was only a few paragraphs, so I was honestly very surprised.
Well, I mean, it's like I said, different things can help and aid and guide you into do different ways than other sources. So I would check that guy's or that girl, whoever wrote it, check their sources, see where they got their info from, and hopefully that can kind of send you rocketing towards something else that would be helpful. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, good stuff. Anybody else? You don't have to talk about it, but if you'd like to, put forth what you did. Yay, nay?
My document, I got a BBC article. It talked about just different key historical moments in the history of marriage. And so a part of it is talking about medieval times. And it explained how kind of earlier in medieval history, you got the arranged marriages that are really just for alliances and things like that. But later down the road, you got people like this monk named Gratian. I forget what the document he wrote was called, but in
so
it,
for our group, Kenzie, like your main thesis of your paper is going to be revolving around what?
The idea, like what marriage was seen as in medieval times.
Cool. Awesome. That's a first time. That's a first for me. That's a first in this class. Somebody looking into medieval marriages. I'm really excited and intrigued by what you're going to find out, because that could be. I've used and brought in a lot of student papers into the material of the course a lot of times, and that would be really cool for gender studies and for other types of things to look into that. So you found the source helpful?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. What did it tell you about the second part? You said there was a range, and then you were going to get into a second part?
Yeah. There's a range, usually just a bunch of alliances, but apparently there's this monk named Gratian who wrote later down the line about the importance of consent on both the man's part and the woman's part, which I thought was interesting. You usually don't think about that.
No, you don't. Wow. That's cool. Cool. Good stuff. Good stuff. Fish, Emily, you guys want to chime in at all? You don't have to.
I'll talk about mine.
Okay.
My thesis is around Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
And the paper I found, it talked I found it very helpful because it was kind of neutral, because it talked about how the French saw her, which is kind of heroic and stuff, but it also talked about how the English saw her, and apparently she terrified the English to the point that there was dissent, and
Yeah.
people just left the English army because they didn't want to face her in battle.
Right.
And what I also found interesting is at the end she made like this brief case that Joan of Arc probably shouldn't have became a saint, because
Oh.
like most medieval women saints had like a cult around them. She
Right.
never had this, and she was for the most part forgotten after her death,
Right.
except for like an annual festival by New Orleans. So like, and she was, I don't know, it was at the very end, she was, how do I say this? I'm sorry.
It's on. Take your time. She's an interesting
She was,
historical figure.
yeah, she was, I forget the word they use, but she was kind of, her trial was relooked at and she was declared innocent
Okay.
post-mortem and stuff.
Yeah.
And then it was until 50 years later they did the saint thing, and
Right.
she was like, that's just kind of weird.
Yeah, that she, right, exactly. That she wasn't. It wasn't something that, it was definitely something that took a couple generations.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, that she wasn't, beatified or turned into a saint for a little while. You see that a few times, more than a few times, with church sources and things like that. So helpful, yes.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Awesome. So where we want to kind of go for this week, we're at about the 20-minute mark, so we'll stick around just a little bit longer. We'll talk about some things for this week. Everybody was cool on how important the Doomsday Book was, hopefully. Okay, so well, like I said, that's kind of where our material will finish up for quiz number 3. We're moving on to chapter 10. All right, and the biggest thing that we want to get on, and I'll share the screen now, and I'll show you a few things that we want to get into with chapter 10. You're seeing here hopefully you're seeing the screen, which will begin our notes and our look into chapter 10, where you have this really cool image right here. Do you guys see this image on the left side of the PowerPoint? Yes, no, maybe so.
Yes.
Okay. This is a really cool image from an illuminated manuscript. And what an illuminated manuscript is essentially a book with colors. It's just a fancy word for a colored book from this era. And this is depicting one of the more important scenes in the High Middle Ages. And this is when, you'll read about this in chapter 10 if you haven't already. This is the scene where Gregory VII is essentially making Henry IV of Germany kneel in front of him and basically say, I'm sorry, to the Pope. This is a huge scene. You have the German king here kneeling. You see him down on bended knee here, kneeling in front of the Pope and basically saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to sort of acquiesce to you. And this is big, okay? Something like this would have never happened in the early Middle Ages. And the question that we're going to deal with this week, ladies and gents, is how does the Pope get to this point? How does the Pope get to where he's having very powerful individuals, kings, emperors of Germany, for instance, kneeling in front of him and saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Please don't kick me out of the church, okay? It's a really interesting growth of power by the Roman Catholic Church. Read about that in your books. That really starts up in earnest on page 293 Okay, so if you want to get down some page numbers, page 293, it really starts up the really good detail on the Papal Revolution. There's a term in the book that I want you guys to get a handle on for Thursday. It's called investiture. Okay, lay investiture is how it's titled on 293. But there's a huge controversy, or a contest, as it was called in the Middle Ages, a contest of power between investiture. And investiture, guys, is just that. You invest someone with power. You give them power. It's meaning you vest them. You know, have you ever heard about when you're at weddings and the priest or the pastor, somebody says, "By the power vested in me." You remember that line? "By the power vested in me, I pronounce you." That vest, the power is invested in that person. Okay, so the investiture controversy is a huge, gigantic royal state versus church controversy in the 1000s and 1100s, which is who gets to name the bishops. All right, who gets to put bishops in the church? All right, because bishops, guys, start to become, pardon the pun, really big, parts of the chessboard here. If you've ever played chess, no, okay. The bishop of a local area, it's sort of, does this person, does he speak for the state or does he speak for the church? Okay, and obviously the kings, the emperors, want to put friendly bishops in the pulpits, obviously because they want them to tell the people in the congregations how close they are and how good the state is going. The church obviously would want to place that bishop in there because the church wants to have some say with how the people of these middle-aged nations are interacting. So this becomes a huge point, and there's going to be excommunications. It's a funny story, if you really get into it. People, you're excommunicated. No, you're excommunicated, and everybody's going to be excommunicating everybody else. And it's going to be really interesting to see what you guys think about that story. The other really big thing, and I'll put this in our invite. You can see that picture right here. You can see that picture on page 296. All right, the picture that I have listed here in the notes is on page 296. You can see German Emperor Henry IV pleading with Pope Gregory VII. All right, these are some W's that you need to have underneath your belt. Who Henry is, who Gregory VII is. And then secondly, the big thing for Thursday is beginning on page 297. I really want you guys to make your way and note up and try and figure out what's going on with Urban II and his call for crusade. And they list the whole speech here. All right. The text preserved by a chronicler named Robert the Monk is listed on page 297. Okay, guys. And I have that listed here. You can see there's a great picture here. Can you guys see that? From another illuminated manuscript of the Pope calling for crusade on November the 27th, 1095. Okay, what is going on in his speech? What is he saying? These are big W's that I want you guys to get for Thursday. What is the Pope saying that needs to happen? Why are we going on crusade? And what is going to be gained by the Crusaders? What can you get from going on crusade? Okay, so I'll stop sharing that right now so we can come back and kind of finish ourselves up here. So is everybody kind of clear on what's happening for Thursday? Okay, you're making your way through that big part of chapter 10, and you're trying to figure out what is an indulgence, who are some of the W's involved with the indulgence contest, and then what is Pope Urban II trying to get people to understand about crusade? Why are we going? And what is to be gained by the crusade? All right, really interesting chapter. All right, and like I said, if you got any questions on that, don't hesitate to message me, Canvas, email, whatever you want. And those brief instructions, again, will come out in the invite that I'll send out here in a little bit. Cool?
Yep.
Awesome. So remember, this week, big week for us, class-wise, point-wise, quiz number 3, big 50 points, and a big 25 points on your completing up your annotation, your annotated bibliography. Okay, so that's the week going forward. Plan your time wisely. I'm trying my hardest not to crush you guys with stuff. You know, I know you know, other classes seem to be going a little bit overboard from what I'm hearing from students. And I'm trying my hardest, like I said, you know, just meeting 2 times a week, and we're trying to keep the syllabus and the schedule exactly the same as it was before. So let me know if you're having any trouble. All right, I'm here to talk. We can even do individual Zooms if you want to do that. Perfectly fine. Okay. So let me know anything. I'm here for you to talk or just bounce ideas off of you. All right. God bless you, Ross. Uh-oh, what do you got? I'm raining judgment down upon you because you sneezed. I did have a pretty cool interaction just to finish up, and I'll stop recording now. But I'll